San Antonio College is inspired to action by learning a more truthful existence of our native urban community through our alliance with the American Indians of Texas of the Spanish Colonial Mission. So I start with that. Come on in, join, make the circle bigger. It's always better to make the circle bigger than make it smaller. And since I don't live here in San Antonio, I consulted a Canadian database which has the native lands of the people who are, it's called the Native Land Database if you haven't seen it. It's native-land.ca. And it's a good database because it gives you the places by zip code or postal code and the people to whom those places belong. And so this is the one in zip code 78205, which is where we are. We are on the land of Jumanos and Apache and Tonkawa land. So if you would take a moment with me to reflect on the injustices we seek to right with regard to the people on whose land we are privileged to sit today. I think it'll be a good way to start our time together. Thank you. Let us do justice. I want to extend a warm welcome. I wish the room were warmer. I have, as I said, made 2 efforts, but we'll see if we have to make another one to get the temperature up. I regret that we do not have a live stream version of this for our friends who couldn't be here. But as you know, the AAR makes that prohibitively expensive or almost impossible to do. So we have solved that problem for ourselves by having a half-year meeting. So in May, we will meet again with a different agenda, of course, but you're welcome to that, and it will be on Zoom, and everybody will be around the world will be able to be there. So that's at least one way to handle this. We did this last year, and it worked out very, very well. If you go to our website, which is www.waterwomensalliance.org, you can get not only information about previous meetings, but also see the video of those meetings. So you're welcome to that. And some of them have really been extraordinary with the kinds of presentations, and we'll be having another one today, that can be very useful for you in teaching and in community work, because these kinds of issues that we talk about are not necessarily talked about everywhere. So with that, let me move into our agenda, where people who are presenting, there are 3 papers being presented. One is on rape, one is on surrogacy, and one is on disability. And they're very, very fine papers, and I really recommend that you attend that session tomorrow, because they're looking at women's daily lives, along with the theme of the AAR this year in terms of La Labor. We're going to be looking at the questions of women's daily lives, and the themes of rape, surrogacy, and disability, I think, are very well chosen by these 3 writers, all of whom have significant monographs on their themes. So I will be the respondent to those papers, so I have had the privilege of reading them, and they really are terrific and raised issues for me that I hadn't thought about in quite that way. So they will be Danielle Tuminio.
That's me. It's
yeah.
Timinio Hansen.
Timinio Hansen. And then Grace Gow and Lisa Powell. And all 3 of these papers are really terrific. Thank you so much for yours. It's really excellent.
Thank you.
And so I welcome you to that as a kind of sister project to this. So please do come. For those of you who are new, again, a special welcome to FLTN. We have this annual meeting and the mid-year meeting that I mentioned. We also have a Google list which goes out with information all year long. And we assume you want to be on the Google list if you sign up for being here. If you don't, just let us know. That's fine too. And Water is the sponsoring agency for this session and has been for the last 27 years. So we are delighted to have your support for Water. We are supported by donors, and we welcome financial contributions to Water if you're so inclined. And if you're not inclined or able, that's fine too, because what we know is that if we share among us, there's enough. If we share among us, there's enough. And we're now 40 years old at Water, and among us there has been enough. And that means that we make no distinction between those who donate or how much they donate or whatever. But some people are extremely capable and generous and donate. Others are simply have other priorities. But everybody's welcome at every Water program, and that's been something from the beginning too. And somehow we've lasted 40 years. So you tell me. Does socialism work? So please see our website for other programs. We have a monthly ritual, we have a monthly meditation, and we also have welcome, and please take your places. We also have a monthly book talk. We will have Rabbi Julia Watts-Belser next month on her new book, Disability, Wisdom, and Spiritual Subversiveness of Knowing Ourselves Whole. Have you seen this book yet? Julia Watts-Belser teaches at Georgetown. Welcome. And that will be the book next month. It's phenomenal. It's really, it's going to be a bestseller, especially in the area of disability rights and activism. So we welcome you to that. Last year we discussed, as I said earlier, the life of Rosemary Radford Ruther, and there is a video of that discussion if you're so inclined on our website, and we encourage you to look at that as well. This year we turn to two deeply interrelated themes: the Voices referendum that failed in Australia recently, and the tragic war in the Middle East, that both have laid bare the complicated dynamics of oppression. And our agenda is, as always, to hear from everybody ever so briefly, so we know who's in the room, who's part of our network. This is often the highlight of the meeting. You get to meet people, and you get to sit with them, and I just read your book. You know, it's like. We will then hear from Michelle Eastwood of the University of Divinity in Australia on the referendum, which is an enormously consequential event, I think, in global history. And then we will talk with each other about two questions that I have related to the war in the Middle East. We're not going to solve it today, believe it or not. We have not been deputized to, but I think if we don't learn how to talk about these things, so the kind of the meta questions of how do we talk with each other about issues that are so difficult and intractable and in the moment deadly. So there's a certain urgency to that conversation. So we'll begin with Michelle after we have our introductions, and then we'll go to that question, and we will be finished fire before 6 o'clock. We always are. And if we're not, we turn off the lights, and that's it. You continue, we're going on. So that's the introduction, and I hope that you feel welcome, and I hope that you feel as if this is a place where you can answer and ask some of your own questions, and that's the most important thing. The video is being recorded. If you don't want to be on the video, please just wave Diane off, and she will turn another way. So, for the introductions, I ask you to, as we say in AAR, Laura, be brief, be witty, be seated. You've read that, which I wrote years and years ago, and it's still on the AAR website. It makes me laugh. But here we will be brief, be witty, and be seated. And so just to say our names, if you wish, your pronouns, and one short thing that you're doing that makes the AAR a meaningful place, or the SPL a meaningful place for you to exchange ideas. What is it that you're doing? Just one thing. So I will demonstrate how this is done. I'm Mary Hunt. I use she, her pronouns. I work at WATER, the Women's Alliance, in Silver Spring, Maryland. And one of the things that makes this place compelling for me to come year after year is I see friends and get up to speed on innovations in the field in that order. I see friends and I get up to speed on innovations in the field in that order. Madonna.
Michelle Eastwood, I'm she, her. I'm connected to the University of Divinity in Melbourne, Australia. I like coming here because there are people who share my nerd, thrilling, very nuanced areas of research, which you don't get in Australia because there just isn't the number of people that are doing this sort of research.
Hi, I'm Tracy McEwen. It's complicated. I live in Sydney on the traditional lands of the Darawal people in southern Sydney, but I'm affiliated with the University of Newcastle, which is about 3 hours north of where I live. And I like coming to the AAR because, as Michelle mentioned, there isn't this concrete mass of people doing feminist theology in Australia, so it's great to come and feel that you're amongst your people. And so it's that kind of, I don't like calling it fellowship because that's a bit churchy, but just being with the people like you, it's nice.
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Phillips. I'm a sociologist for Religion and Gender, and I work at the University of Newcastle, Australia. Tracy is my close colleague. We are the co-authors of the International Survey. Yeah, two notes. So I love coming to the AAR because it's a great opportunity for us to share our work, sometimes in Australia we can feel a bit isolated. It's also a fantastic opportunity to meet like-minded scholars and to hear new work at the edge of thinking. And yeah, so I think it's just been a great place. I love coming to the FLTN. So thank you, Mary.
Hi, I'm Rosie Clare-Shorter. I'm part of the massive non-existent Australian Scholars.
Are y'all all here right now?
I work mainly so I'm an early career researcher, so I have contracts across many universities that are all casual. I mainly work at Deakin University in Melbourne on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. I'm a sociologist of religion and I do gender studies, and I've never been here before, and I'm here because Tracy told me.
Well, welcome, a special welcome.
Hi, my name is Lauren Artie Larkin, and my pronouns are she, her. I've attended a number of AAR sessions. However, considering that I'm about to submit my dissertation and defend it in coming winter, I am attending this year specifically with the intention to find out where my research fits in. So I have, for the first time, I feel like I have direction, even though those directions are polyvariant in various directions. But so I'm here because of how it relates to the research that I've been doing.
And you're here from where?
Oh, it's complicated. I'm getting my PhD through the University of Aberdeen, but I don't go to the University of Aberdeen. I'm a full-time Episcopal priest in Grand Junction, Colorado.
Okay.
And that's where my 3 kids also live with me. So it's
complicated.
yeah, it is complicated.
Hi, my name is Amy Allen, and I'm actually a Hebrew Bible scholar, mostly working in prophetic literature, but I've been doing a lot of writing and speaking recently from my Indigenous background and feminist. So thank you for the land recognition at the beginning. I appreciate that. One of the projects I'm currently working on is the First Nations version translation. I'm a Hebrew consultant on that, and just really interested in ecological. My newest writing is an ecological, feminist, indigenous perspectives on how these sacred texts can inform our current situation. So.
My turn. Leon Harris. I'm from Biola University. Those of you, I don't know if you heard of it or not, but it doesn't matter. I enjoy coming to AAR because it allows me to get into space with like-minded people, which is very rare in the space I'm at right now. So I enjoy coming to spaces where people care about people and care about those who are marginalized and oppressed. And so I love hearing that, and that's pretty much what drew me here today. And it allows me to expand my scholarship, but also my thinking, and also expand, and I can incorporate and listen to other voices and learn. So that's another reason why I love this space, because it just learns and just has been transformative for me to a different person. So I just enjoy this space. I'm looking for this as a time to even learn more. And yeah, but that's it. Oh, by the way, I graduated from the University of Aberdeen too.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so go Aberdeen.
That football team is really.
Greetings, my name is Tony Bond. I am Associate Professor of Ethics at Methodist Theological School in Ohio. I also have an honor of being one of the 12 Black women who coined the term reproductive justice and created the movement 30 years ago.
Thank you.
And that actually ties into one of my big projects right now. Being involved in planning the celebration of reproductive justice in June of next year, and also collecting the oral narratives of the 12 family mothers. And kind of like documenting the work of not just the 12 of us, but Black women in the reproductive and sexual justice movement over the past 30 years. And that's why I'm here at AAR, because it helps helps me integrate my activism with my scholarship.
And I'm sure you know that Loretta Ross is being inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in
I
March.
do.
At a celebration in New York City that will be televised on PBS.
I do.
Another of
I'm a
the
Graham MacArthur fellow. It doesn't get much better than that.
well, and another one of those who's being inducted is Judith Plaskow.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right,
And
that's
I
right.
just read yesterday, guess who else? Serena Williams. Serena.
Wow.
Serena Williams. So, and Judith just wrote to me and said that her granddaughter is really pumped about seeing Serena. It's going to be great. Congratulations. Please.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Beverly Wallace, and like you, it's complicated. So currently, I'm working with Virginia Theological Seminary, Episcopalian Seminary, doing adjunct work with Columbia Presbyterian Seminary. I'm Lutheran, but I've been recently working with Dr. Jacqueline Grant in getting her papers together. And in getting her papers together, I saw your name. And I told Evangeline that I've seen your name, and so she invited me here to this.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I'm always happy to see Evangeline. And, wow, the papers of Jacqueline Grant. That's a treasure.
Yeah, she's getting ready
That's
to move to
treasure.
Columbia, South Carolina, and I'll be starting at Lutheran Theological Southern Seminary December 1st.
Wow.
Wow.
Complicated.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You're in the right place.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
to sit next to her. Oh my
Evangeline, thank you. Evangeline, go ahead.
I'm Evangeline Anderson Rajkumar. I was in theological education, formal theological education for about 25 years before moving to the US. And right now I'm a Lutheran pastor in Versailles, Indiana. My husband, daughter, and I are the only people of color in my congregation. And what a joy it is to unpack those stereotypes and look for new ways of rereading the Bible with new eyes and being a community together. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Glad to hear it.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim Carford. I teach at the University of San Francisco. And I've taught a class called Christian Feminist Theology for the past 3 years, and it's a community engaged learning class. And I often tell the students I'm really glad I'm in San Francisco because I teach this stuff, and I feel like, I don't know, I'd like to hear what other people have to say, but I think that the topics that are brought up can be complicated, and I don't know anybody else's experience teaching this, but so I look forward to kind of connecting with you on that note. And it's a community engaged learning class, and so actually at this meeting a few years ago, I met the Women's Ordination Conference, and I'd never heard of them, go figure. And so they're now a community partner. So that's one thing that I really like about the AAR is meeting people to collaborate and kind of bring new, not just ideas into the world, but actual community projects. And another reason I'm here is because I'm the co-chair of the Religion and Ecology unit. I'm also really interested in ecofeminist theology.
Didn't we have your students one summer on water? That was
You did, yes. That went not how I planned.
It was fun.
There were some issues, so yes, you did.
Go right ahead.
Stephen Savides. I am visiting assistant professor of anthropology and sociology at Principia College. It's a small school in Illinois. I also pastor a church, interim minister at UCC Church in Silver Lake, Ohio. So my work, though, my academic work, is in decolonial discourses in sub-Saharan Africa, and specifically focusing on the ways that sexuality is feeding into that. And there's some pretty woke scholars from sub-Saharan Africa, and I love working in that field. And I think AAR for me is just an opportunity to be with scholars and to learn from scholars in non-extractivist ways and figure out how to do this, obviously as a white hetero man, how to do this with sensitivity, how to do this with a non-capitalistic extractivist viewpoint, which I see so much wrong.
Gotcha.
I'm Kate Common, she, they pronouns. I am also at Methodist Theological School in Ohio with Tony, so that's an honor. Yeah, I love AAR because I get to see folks I haven't seen in years. We all kind of descend to the same city, so
old friends and new friends, and really learn from folks in different fields, and just sort of be in awe that there's this many folks doing this type of work. It's just a good reminder that we're out there and we can connect and sort of build community, even if we're only in person maybe once a year together. So.
Great, and you have a book coming out.
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I have a book coming out called Undoing Conquests, and it looks at biblical texts around conquests and from a practical theological lens, and how those stories shaped white settler colonialism, particularly in the U.S., and then what we can do about it from a practical perspective with churches in mind and liturgy and ritual about that. So Mary was kind enough to do a blurb for me.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Really important.
My name is Nanette Pitt, South African originally, and as a white South African, having the opportunity to graduate from Simmons College with sociology and gender studies, and then go to Andover Newton, I came out of seminary raging, and I am now 10 years into the slog of being a practitioner in Akron, Ohio, as the pastor of a church, 20th senior minister, first female, first immigrant, and I am tired, and I am about done. Jalen Walker happened, we got a new mayor elected, I am done, I'm tired. So I'm here to just listen and hopefully be restored or maybe led on to something else. But that's me.
Glad you're here.
Wow, thank you.
Ross?
Rosalind Hinton. I got introduced to the Women's Caucus through Dr. Mary Hunt, who said, you might find a home over there, and I have. We have really brought up the scholarship, and I had a biographies panel, and one thing I really enjoy is bringing young scholars from Africa here to speak, and I think we might even have a book deal. So they do their own thing, and they have a lot going on also, but I think I'm learning from them about their values and how they do things, and maybe they're learning a little from me.
Sounds exciting. Wait.
Hi, my name is Bo Young Lee, and I teach at ILIF School of Theology in Denver. I did a dean for 6 years and sabbatical in January, going back to classroom where my heart is. So, done. I am also here as the president and chair of the board of PANATOM, which is a Pacific Asian and North American Asian Women in Theology and Ministry. PANATOM, co-founded by Kwak Hui Lan, Rita Brock, Jung Young, and all our first generation mothers. So thanks to your generous guidance and wisdom in 2019, we became a nonprofit. And so right now, I was elected as president, but now we became nonprofit, so I'm also board chair. So very, multiple roles that I play, but the next year we celebrate 40 years.
Amazing.
So, and that's the, without PANATOM, I cannot imagine where I would have been, because that's the home.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's so exciting. It's been great all the years, but now, wow. Welcome.
Welcome.
Come on in. Join.
Hello everyone, my name is Nami Kim. I teach at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. She, her. I always drag actually coming to AR. I always tell me, why did I sign up for this and that? But then at the end of AR, I always tell me, oh, okay, great, I came, right? So it's a kind of ongoing cycle. So this year, I told Doyle, oh my goodness.
She's the vice chair, vice president.
So I told Boyle, oh my goodness, Boyle, why did I, sign up for this and that, and then I'm sure, I'll be happy for attending the last day of AAR. So, and this is one of my, plays in AAR too. For times I missed it, but I've been coming to this meeting pretty much all my AAR, time, so happy to be back.
I don't think you're the only one who dreads coming. Especially like a day or two before when your papers are not done, you know what I mean? What was I thinking? But great, glad you came. Please.
I'm Danielle Timonio Hansen. I'm at Emory University in Atlanta, and I am the assistant professor of practical theology and spiritual care. So prior AARs, I've been at the PCRL meeting that happens at this time. So this is my first time with you all, and I'm really excited to be with you all because it's a whole new set of conversation partners, and that's actually why I really love coming to AAR, because I remember dreading coming to AAR, especially as a graduate student, and having those memories of once being intimidated and now feeling just so energized by the conversations and the new conversation partners is really enlivening for me. So that's who I am. Excited to be with you all.
So I'm Elizabeth Fries. I teach a course on religion, or have been teaching a course on religion and social justice at Drew Theological School. And right now I am also serving as scholar in residence with an organization called Sacred, so the Spiritual Alliance of Communities for Reproductive Dignity. And we're working to be a part of conversations, provide educational materials, and some leadership around, the way that people engage those issues in congregations, multi-faith. And but these two things are converging for me right now with my colleague at Sacred and I are going to be teaching religion and social justice at Drew in the spring. And so I really kind of grokked into my identity as a scholar activist, and so I really like to be here because I'm primarily in the activist world, and so to be able to make those connections, as Tony was mentioning, is really even more valuable. And I'm also working on a book that I need to find a publisher for, so I'm gonna do that, which is the first time I've done that in all my years of coming to AR, is walk around and talk to those people. But anyway, I'm hoping to talk to, or my colleague are hoping to talk to several of you, including Tony, maybe Diane, about, we're hoping to have guests at our course this spring, and bring in experts in various particular areas to speak to different module topics. So some of you I might be in touch with, and Danielle.
One-stop shopping here.
Yeah,
Get it all done.
Forewarned.
Thanks so much, welcome.
My name is Wynn Whalen. I'm a Franciscan. I am interested in so many things, it's hard to say what I'm interested in, but I think the bottom line is feminist religion, feminist theology, and to recognize all of the women that from the beginning of the world who have done great things. So I'd like to give them all a Coke, so to speak. And the thing that I think is special about AAR is the interreligiousness of it. So you get, you kind of have to go out of your way. I find I have to kind of go out of my way to find people from various orientations, but it's very valuable, I think, when I do.
I'm Colleen Hartung, and I am associated with the Women in Religion Wikipedia project, and I'm the chair of the board at Holy Wisdom Monastery in Madison, Wisconsin. It's an ecumenical Benedictine monastery, and I love coming to the AAR because I get to see people that I have worked with all year virtually. I get to see them in person, and I get to reconnect with people that I have worked with in the past, and I get to connect with people's passions and their talents, and just listen to their knowledge, but also think about how it intersects, how the things we're trying to do to improve the world intersect. So that's what I'm today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
or I prefer also not to use any pronouns. I'm based at Humboldt University in Berlin, in Germany. I'm an art historian and gender studies scholar. I appreciate the opportunity of being here today, particularly because in my research I'm teaching, I'm interested in the image politics linked to the question of anti-fascist and anti-nationalist resistances in different contexts, and so I'm looking very much forward to our discussion from the multidisciplinary perspective today. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, I have been here for, I don't know, 15 years or more. My name is Ulrike Auger, and I'm also the co-chair of the international section of the Women's Caucus. And so I also invite everybody to join and join more and cooperate in the Women's Caucus. In Berlin, I'm a professor at Humboldt University I was theology and gender studies. That's not possible anymore with gender studies, so that's why I had to redirect, and so I'm a professor for intercultural theology, comparative religion and ecumenics. Because in Germany the possibility of working as a professor for theology and gender studies is declining. There are no posts anymore for that. And I have a deep interest in the connection between activism and theology. So I was part of the peaceful revolution in East Germany, so that's my background. So where I started liberation theology. I'm a Lutheran, I'm also an ordained minister in the Lutheran Church. But then I discovered that also liberation theology has a lot of oppression, and that a lot of opening up needs to be done. So that's why I did a PhD in cultural theory, and from there also worked in post-colonial theory, post-secular and gender queer theory. And I did my PhD in South Africa, was then in Mali for 2 years, and 3 years in East Jerusalem. That's why the current conflict, I have friends and victims of all of these different sites, and I find it very important that we speak today about this kind of conflict also.
So my name is Jackie McKenna. I come from Kenya. This is my very first time to be at the AR, and I'm so happy to see all of us here. I'm currently a student at the Ecumenical Institute at BOSE, affiliated to the University of Geneva in Switzerland, pursuing an advanced master's in ecumenical studies, and also a doctoral student at the University of Anglia Ruskin. My interest is on gender and social justice, and my goal to all these is I'm looking forward to a just community of men and women, a community that social justice and human dignity are at the center, and that is the very reason why I am here, to interact with great minds that I read in books, and also to put a face on some of the people that we read and use their literature. Thank you.
We are delighted that you are here.
Yes.
Delighted that each one is here. I'm going to do something very un-AAR. Would you just join me in saying thank you to someone next to you or near you? We never say thank you to each other.
And I've been to Thank you. I love your book.
Yes. I guarantee this is the first time at AAR. Shall we continue? Did you ever do that before? I never did that before at the AAR. That's good. I want to turn now to Australian Voices Referendum as an example of the kinds of issues that feminist liberation theologians and other scholar activists are involved in. The topic was to be paired in this meeting with a presentation on the Equal Rights Amendment in the United States, which was only introduced 100 years ago. And needless to say, it went the same way as the referendum. more times than not. It has been reintroduced now and we're struggling. But Alison McKinley Tim, who was supposed to be with us, has health issues and so could not be here, but promises that she will do this program. I think she promises she'll do this program at the mid-year. So we will pick up from some of the dynamics that you're going to talk about from Australia at the mid-year meeting in terms of how the ERA issues for women over 100 years and now the referendum issues in Australia for many more years than that play out and what it means for us. So I think these are foundational commitments both to Native people and to women that continue to be dismissed and demeaned in most parts of the world, and particularly, I think, in the ones that we're going to highlight today. I'm happy to introduce Michelle, who's the Director of Research. Is that still the case? At Australian Lutheran College, Executive Officer for ANZATS, which is the Australian and New Zealand Association of Theological Studies. She has degrees in psychology, history, education, and theology, and her current research interests have to do with gender and sexuality, the Psalms, worship, and liturgy. So this is someone wearing many hats and wearing them with great style. She has a growing interest in public theology, which I think is going to be on exhibit right now. And we welcome you, and we're so glad that you bring your experience and that you will bring us some analysis of this very important and extremely difficult issue as it has played out in Australia, and it has many cousins around the world. So you'll be helping us to see in our various contexts. I notice several countries represented that need to hear this. So welcome. Great to have you back again at FLTN.
Thank you for inviting me. So since I wrote my bio, I've also picked up a role with the University of Divinity School of Indigenous Studies. So for me, that's been a really interesting space to be working. In Australia, it is customary now to start with an acknowledgement of country, but when I did my research, it said a different tribal people, so I'm just going to say it, and if it's wrong, that's will do. So I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Payaya people of the Tapil Pawil Takens Nation. And apologies if I mispronounce the name, and if you know the right pronunciation and want to help me get it right, I would be really grateful. I'd also like to acknowledge that I work, write and play on the unceded and sovereign lands of the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to any Indigenous people here in the room today and acknowledge the care of the lands over many thousands of years. So in October, citizens of the country now called Australia were required to vote in a referendum to change our constitution in order to include an Indigenous voice to Parliament. The Voice, as it is colloquially known, was a proposed consultative body comprised of democratically elected Indigenous people who would provide advice for the government. And this advice was limited to issues that impact Indigenous people. As Prime Minister Anthony Albanese assured a fearful and conservative public, the Voice would be an advisory committee only and would not have any capacity to enact laws in and of itself. However, as Mary has noted, the referendum failed with not one state voting in support of it. Only the Australian Capital Territory voted yes, and the state of Victoria, where I live, came next closest with 45% support. The Australian Capital Territory, or ACT, is the home to the nation's capital and is overrepresented by people who are highly educated and younger, the very demographic most likely to vote yes. The ACT has a long history of being more socially progressive than other areas, although as a territory, it doesn't have the same voting weight in referenda that the states do. So throughout this presentation, I'll make reference to the lands now called Australia, and this phrase was coined by Waka Waka woman Brooke Prentice, and it acknowledges that the nation-state of Australia is a colonial imposition on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander land where sovereignty has never been ceded. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been living on the lands now called Australia for an estimated 65,000 years. They are considered the oldest continuing living culture in the world, and their wisdom and traditions have helped them to thrive across the diversity of lands that make up our island continent. The first known European contact with this land occurred in 1606 by Dutch sailors with Spanish boats following soon after. Throughout the 17th century, Dutch sailors explored the western and southern coasts and called the land New Holland. The land, however, remained uncolonised until the arrival of the British First Fleet in 1886, at which point a pattern of invasion 1776, you're right, sorry. Numbers are not my forte. At which point a pattern of invasion, colonisation and genocide led to the wide-scale destruction of Indigenous populations, both through direct killing and the more indirect introduction of disease alongside dispossession of lands and removal of children. The Aboriginal people who survived were often rounded up onto missions where all aspects of their lives were controlled. These experiences are starting to be revealed and interrogated through the works of people such as Larissa Berendt, Chelsea Bottego, Claire Coleman and other Indigenous writers and scholars, and I really recommend their works to you. One of the things revealed by the referendum debates was a distinct lack of knowledge about the atrocities committed against the First Nations people and the way systemic discrimination continues today and the consequential nature of ongoing trauma and its impacts. Australia has the distinction, I am told, of being the only country that doesn't have a treaty with its Indigenous people. And this is partly because what you might call our founding fathers thought the Indigenous people would be wiped out within a generation or two, so there was no need for a treaty in their eyes. In 1967, a successful referendum was held that for the first time acknowledged Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as citizens of the nation-state that is Australia. Before that, they just weren't counted. On 26th of January 1972, 4 Aboriginal men, Michael Anderson, Billy Craigie, Tony Puri and Bertie Williams, arrived in Canberra, again Australia's capital city, to establish an Aboriginal embassy. The embassy consisted of a beach umbrella on the lawn in front of Parliament House, which I think is very typically Australian. Although the umbrella was replaced soon after by several tents, prompting the current name of the Aboriginal Tent Embassy. This was the beginning of the longest continuous protest for Indigenous land rights in the world. The date, 26th of January, is important to note because this has been known as Australia Day for some years now, marking the arrival of the First Fleet, which was a group of 11 convict ships from Britain, and their arrival into what is now known as Port Jackson. More recently, in response to growing protests and unrest, January 26 is now commonly referred to as Invasion Day, with increasing numbers of local and state government bodies choosing not to hold citizenship and other celebrations on this day as acts of solidarity with and for the First Nations people of the land. In 2017, a petition by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders called the Uluru Statement from the Heart, and Uluru is the big red rock that sits in the middle of our nation that you've probably seen pictures of, was submitted to the Australian government calling for reforms to recognise the continuing sovereignty of Indigenous people in the lands now called Australia, and to address the structural and systemic barriers facing First Nations people. The Uluru Statement called for the voice, as well as a Makarrata Commission to oversee the process of treaties with the diverse Indigenous groups across the lands now called Australia, and to establish a truth-telling process about the history and treatment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. These processes are more simply known as voice, treaty, and truth. As noted, the voice is the first of these to be proposed on a national level, although there are current treaty negotiations being held across the nation in recognition that no Indigenous tribe can speak for another, and so treaties, in the plural, are being negotiated at the local and state level with the traditional owners of the lands. In the wake of the referendum defeat, some of these treaty negotiations have already been scaled back. So we voted in October, we're only in November, and the impact is already the scaling back of these treaties. So I think it's worth noting that in 1993, the Native Title Act was established, which theoretically gave Indigenous peoples recognition of their connection to the land. However, the reality is that native title has been hard to prove and undermined by mining and other business interests. It's also worth considering that Australia is a relatively conservative nation. For a referendum to succeed, a majority of people overall must vote in favour, as well as a majority of the states, and this is called a double majority. Within the history of the Australian colony, there have been 45 referenda, the first being held in 1906, and of these 45, only 8 have passed. Now, so I just wanted to draw attention to, so this is my yes badge, and if you want to come and look closely, it's got actually an Indigenous symbol or an Indigenous artwork behind the words yes, and the colours red and yellow are significant because the Aboriginal flag is made up of the colours black, red and yellow. So, the explanations given for the failure of this referendum are diverse. Some note that it was driven by racism and the ongoing nature of these lands as a white colonial project. Some say it was a failure of the Yes campaign to clearly articulate their vision. Some opposition to the Voice came from Indigenous leaders themselves, some who opposed the Voice in favour of black sovereignty, and some who have argued that colonisation has actually been good for the Indigenous people. The sad reality is that this defeat has emboldened racists, shown that there is not wide-scale political goodwill towards supporting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and probably means there won't be another opportunity to set this right for many years to come. So in the wake of the referendum, in the School of Indigenous Studies, there was quite a bit of mourning from the Indigenous people who are employed there, and it still is quite a sensitive time. So as a white person, I'm sure I don't feel it in the same way, but I certainly hope to act with solidarity in terms of our First Nations people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Depressingly familiar and important in terms of the way these issues are handled around the world.
Is there some way to turn up the heat?
I've tried twice. Okay, I suggested a fire pit might be necessary. I've literally asked you, one man came in and did it, and another person, yeah, you can't do it, you need the password for that.
I know, I was just...
If you like to go out and chase down someone, I have already chased 2 of them, and this is the result. So, but if anybody else wants to go out and try to find someone, I will. Would you? Wait a minute. No, thanks, Tracy. So.
Back with somebody.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, no, I've tried twice. I mean, I have to decide with you. That's right. Long underwear at the AAR. The only solution. Thank you so much. You really have given us a good overview of a very difficult situation, and one that, especially for those of us in countries that have acted similarly, well, you've given us a lot to think about and a lot to learn. And I think it will be so important to see how this plays out in Australia as a model for other people, and yet I can only imagine how difficult it is for you and for others for whom yes is the only answer. I'm going to open the floor for people who might want to have comments or questions, and then we'll move to our second topic. But please, the floor is open. Within a minute, but let's continue with this for a minute with Mich, because this is so important what you've laid out. See why I wanted the Equal Rights Amendment to be paired with it, and some of these dynamics of especially what you said at the end. Maybe you could flesh that out a little bit more. The reasons why it didn't pass. I think that is fascinating and really breathtaking in the 21st century, and yet depressingly familiar, as I said in my first impression. Yeah.
about that?
Well, I guess one of the reflections I had, a good friend I was talking to about the referendum, and he said, I voted yes because I didn't think it was passed. So this is an intelligent person who is for First Nations rights in a sort of broad sense, but he didn't have a sense that he understood what the mechanism was for this. The day after, I was going to a conference in Melbourne. So I live in Geelong, which is about an hour away from Melbourne. So I caught the train up and I was standing at the tram stop to go to the conference. And someone said to me, I just smiled at them and they started talking to me. And she said, oh, I voted yesterday. And I said, oh, how did you vote? And she said, I voted no. I was like, oh, okay, so why did you do that? And she said, all Aboriginal people are drunks. They drink at work. And I went, oh, but white people drink at work too, like. And then she just sort of brushed that off. And then she said to me, my husband told me to vote no. And I was like, oh, okay. And then she said, and then, anyway, this is not their land. They come from South Africa. And I'm like, no, they were here first. And she's like, no. And at that point, she kind of walked away and she didn't want to continue the conversation because for sometimes I just let these things pass, but that one I wasn't going to let pass. But there is all these conflicting arguments and things. And so I said that, some Indigenous people voted no. So one of the people is Jacinta Price. So it's interesting in this sort of context that two of the big women who were used as voices in it, two Indigenous women. Jacinta Price she's the one who says that colonisation has been good for the Indigenous people.
She's a senator.
She's a senator in Australia, so she carries some weight. And lots of people have said, well, why would an Indigenous person vote against their own interests? Well, if we understand that it's one of her relatives, and I can't remember if it's a grandparent or great-grandparent, but the only way they survived one of these killings was to go along with the white people. And so then if your life depends on wedding yourself to white interests, then I think you can see that that plays out in interesting ways, or ways that look like that. So, and I think we need to have sympathy for that there are people who we would think would sit on the side of the oppressed, often actually align themselves with the oppressor because it's much safer. The other person who was often large in the debate is Lydia Thorpe. So Lydia Thorpe, again, is someone in our parliament. She used to be a member of what is called the Greens Party, so it's an environmentally friendly party. But it's a minority party, so they're always they are able to speak out in a way that the major parties don't often. She was very anti the Voice because she wants Indigenous sovereignty, and she said this was just a colonial imposition, and that it wasn't meaningful. Now, Lydia's a really interesting person because she is very outspoken, and so you probably know the trope of the angry black woman that's often applied to Lydia. So people who wouldn't necessarily appreciate Lydia's commentary on things were suddenly happy to listen to her because it actually aligned with their own interests. So she's someone who, she can be very confronting, and I've followed for her for a long time, and I really respect her opinion, even though I disagreed with her on this. But yes, it was interesting, for me it was very interesting to see the way these two Indigenous women were used because they fit an agenda rather than because people appreciated who they were and the complexity of what they were saying. So one of the other things that I found really disappointing within the campaign is, so all our referendums and our voting is run through what's called the Australian Electoral Commission. And as part of that, every household in Australia was delivered a pamphlet, and the yes case got to write 1,000 words in it, and the no case got to write 1,000 words. But there was no fact checking on those words. So the no case clearly had lies being spread, and people believed those lies, and the same kind of disinformation that we've seen around COVID, around lots of other issues, were absolutely present within the No campaign, and they were effective. People believed the lies, and I guess sometimes didn't have the will to go and investigate and unpack the lies, or sometimes it suits their agenda to believe the lies. But also I think that as a society, well, as an Australian society, the media is incredibly powerful, and unfortunately this bad news and this disinformation seems to sell, or the people propagating it seem to have really effective ways of using it and getting that message out there, and that to sit on the other side and perhaps present a more nuanced or a more complicated view is a really hard sell. And this is something that we have to continue to grapple with, I think, and I think it sits across a range of topics and topics that are social justice topics, right? Because they're often complicated.
Thank you.
There was a question.
Question, comment? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question in terms of the young people. You mentioned that the demographic skewed younger in the capital and voted yes. What does that look like across the country? Is it that, maybe 20 years or 10 years it might, like the country might move less conservative because of the young people?
So as a Gen Xer, can I say when we get rid of the boomers?
There's a couple of really good podcasts that came out around the time of the referendum. There's a podcast called The Conversation, and it has an analysis in it of the different electorates across the country and how they've voted in various referendums. I don't know whether you've listened to it, Michelle. And the demographics in terms of age and political affiliation. And there's a pattern there that is repeated across referendums and across, the two-party system in Australia. We've got the Liberal and the Labor Party, which is, parallels to your Republican and Democratic
Confusingly,
Party.
the Liberal Party is a Conservative Party.
Yes. And, so for instance, the electorate that I'm in, there's a lot of young people, but they're our previous Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, who was a Liberal Prime Minister, and an evangelical. God put him into office. He really influenced, he really holds a lot of influence over my electorate. So there was a huge no vote in the area that I'm in. And so there's a lot of analysis done around the age, political preference, and it's, if you're into that type of thing, like I found it really interesting. Yeah.
The No campaign also had an amazing social media strategy that the Yes campaign lagged behind and didn't really pick up on until kind of week before. So some analysis has said that there was a kind of assumed reliance on a youth vote that potentially was lost through the no use of social media.
It's worth thinking too that, so I live I live close to Melbourne, so inner city Melbourne tends to lean left, and the further in Victoria, the further you got out from Melbourne, the less likely you were to vote yes. In Victoria, because they were fairly successful at rounding up all our Indigenous people, you don't tend to meet Indigenous people, or you might meet them and not know. So years ago when I was teaching, I taught psychology, and at the end of the class it was around Halloween and someone was going to a party, and this boy says, the theme of the party I'm going to is something scary, I'm going to dress up as an Aboriginal. And I was so shocked, I couldn't believe it. And he then left the room, and this girl was sitting there who I wouldn't have known was Indigenous. She said, people say these things all the time, you just wouldn't believe it. So like in Victoria, all the Indigenous people I know would be white passing. In the Northern Territory, you're much more likely you have remote communities who are much more likely to live in the land, and so there's a different set of issues there. In Perth, there seems to be lots of racism and lots of clashes between white people and the Indigenous people. so each different area has really different politics surrounding it. Or as Tracy said, in Sydney it's different again. Well, Sydney tends to skew conservative more than Melbourne too. So there's lots of local issues, right? You can't just say the nation. I mean, while the nation all did vote no, there's also lots of intricacies on a very quite local level that really are informed by local connection with Indigenous people, or lack of connection.
And part of the complication was too, when Australia federated, like the US, I think there was separate states and they came into a federation in 1901. The federation was made up of each state had its separate governance. So there was a lot of concern amongst the founding fathers, so to speak, that the New South Wales and Queensland would have undue influence over the federation as a whole. So this system of each state having to, like the majority system, state by state, came in a referendum. So one particular state couldn't hold undue influence over the federation, and that has kind of no longer is a valid system. The nation is, a nation, and I think it would have perhaps been different. I don't know whether it would have been different if it had been the whole country voting than state by state.
I'm going to move on to our next topic, but with reluctance. I think that what we've been hearing here is so very important that I hope we can pick up on some of it in May as well. I think that this is the way this played out in Australia is so instructive for the rest of us that I really believe we need to talk more about it, and we need to hear more from you about some of the reasons, some of these rather shocking reasons, frankly, but also how because they resonate so much for the rest of us. And so I want to thank you, not only you but your team. I'd like to thank you with your entourage. But it really is very, very significant to us, and I want to thank you for coming, and also thank you for being part of this conversation over the long years. And we need to be part of this conversation with you. And so if I think you'll agree with me that we need to stick with this at least one more time to look at some of the deeper nuances of this. So thank you so very, very much. The former students, the newly minted, really taking leadership, and this is a great example of it. That said, there's a war in the Middle East. There are few words to capture the tragedy of the current conflict. I will not attempt to do so. Rather, the complexity and the urgency of it compelled us at Water to set aside this time for some international sharing, which few of us can do in any other place. And we don't have a lot of time to do this, but I think if we open the topic without any expectation of solution, or with a deep sense of pain for people throughout the region, and an equally deep sense of care and concern for those among us for whom, as you mentioned, it is a personal existential matter, whether we're Jews or Muslims or Christians or of no religious tradition whatsoever. I think we might be able to do something here. Maybe it's just me, but I feel so utterly helpless on this one, and utterly disconnected from so many pieces of it, and yet so deeply involved and affected by it, and almost to the point of literally not having words to describe what's going on. I mean, the babies in the incubators just say it all, I think, or the babies without the incubators at this moment. So in the short time we have together, I want to suggest that we have kind of a meta conversation, because most of us are scholar activists. We're going to have other situations where we're going to be talking about this, and the hard problem is how to talk about it. Maybe it's just me, but how to have a civil conversation with people who see these things so deeply, so viscerally, and so differently. So what I thought we could do is two things, really. One is to identify for ourselves, and it's really kind of a personal thing, and in conversation, where we start on this where do you start? I mean, if you're a Jew, you start one place. If you're a Muslim, you start another place. If you're if peace is your primary religion, you start someplace else. Where are we located, and with whom are we allied? And how do we see the situation in all of its complexity, especially in terms of women, children, and female-identified persons? And I just think if we could start, if people could start, and I have copies of this, I'm going to hand you the questions they're just my questions. You can talk about whatever you want, but then I think we can begin to imagine how we can be useful. What might be insights from our work in the feminisms, in liberationist work of various sorts, and of theologies that might be unique and relevant resources when taken together? I mean, what could feminist liberation theology, as a unique starting point, bring to try to help people to have meaningful conversations, especially people who see this so differently? Whether it's going to be in your church or your synagogue, whether it's going to be in your classroom, whether it's going to be in your neighborhood, community association, among your peace-seeking friends. I've chosen these meta questions rather than the war itself for our conversation. I mean, time constraints are one thing, but quite frankly, I think it's so upsetting to so many of us on so many levels that to make a contribution to figure out how we could get back to some basics about where we start, who we start with whom we're allied, what those alliances look like. So I'm going to suggest that we do that for about 15 minutes in this room. And yes, actually? No, yes, you're agreeing. And I want you to gather with people, not the people you came with, not the people you know, not the people you're going to dinner with, but gather with people, complete and utter strangers here, people that you don't know at all. And start having this, to say who you are, because it'll help you to say who you are in this, looking at this, okay, my partner's Jewish, my partner's, something about yourself that will help you to locate yourself in terms of how you watch the news about this, how you see this, how it plays out, what it feels like. And then begin to think about what comes from who we are, uniquely from who we are in terms of feminist liberation, theology, activists, etc., that could be useful. We're all grabbing at straws, but I think this might be one way to spend the half hour we have that could help.
It was touching, and thank you for sharing your perspectives.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, we had one from Australia and one from Berlin, and me. So.
Yeah, great. How about over here, this crowd?
We come from different, grounded organizational situations, but I think maybe one of our common themes was that people were trying to approach it with feminist values in one form or another, and approaches and praxis, and yet the difficulty under extreme circumstances of being able to hold that praxis, staying in that solidarity and maintaining those principles. I mean, the whole thing is just like a big screwed up masculinist paradigm of conflict resolution. Yeah, and so now we're, if feminists could be in charge, I think it would go differently because of that praxis, and learn and help other people, as you guys were saying, young people who maybe understand it up here, but not necessarily in terms of the doing of it and the hard process of it.
Yeah, it's really one, I think in our group too, is the need for creativity. That some of what feminist liberation theology has been is nothing but creativity. I mean, we've been creating things out of whole cloth for a very long time, people before us, and it requires a certain. We use that best, I think, letting go of some of what it means to be a real Jew, what it means to be a real man, what it means to be a real German. That threat to what the threat to the essentialized definition of many things at a time when, why would you want to do that? Well, how many thousands of people have to die before, for your essentialism?
Right.
So that really is one way to think about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. But I thought that was came out of our discussion in a very helpful way. Anybody else? Yeah, Teresa, and then we're going to close it up.
Well, I want to say I appreciate you having us talk about this because it's been very painful for all of us, and none of us have any answers for it. but I want to say Colleen comes from it as a mother. So being able, connecting with, all of the children that have passed away, and then Danielle from the perspective of trauma. There's trauma on both sides. How is it that you find healing in terms of the trauma? And then with Jackie, the concept of just the focus should be on humanity, and she said prayer. So, and I appreciate her saying prayer because in the midst of everything, I have been unsettled. I think a lot of other people, here we are at a religion conference, and I'm not sure how, what of our spiritual practices are, but I appreciate that. And I want to say for myself as an educator, I was in Israel, and I came into the conversation because I wanted to talk about the complicity of the Catholic Church within the Holocaust as a Catholic educator. And so I ended up going to Israel twice. I learned about what their perspective was, and then I came back and my department chair said, you need to learn about the Palestinian voice. So I was able to, when this all happened, when it happened, I talked to all my environmental justice classes about the history. So I think what I've been pushing is that we need to be educated about the history so that we kind of can understand the pain or the trauma that is going on. But I'm just, and as a result, our students we've had teach-ins on campus about the Palestinian. So I'm happy that at Cal State LA, we've had two different protests per se on campus. But I'm not sure, we need to bring the voice, is our political system like Australia? We have Republicans and Democrats, we have Israel, Palestinians. So I think the best thing that we can do is try to have conversations and really do listen to other people. So
yes, we're not going to solve it today, but at least we had some experience. We didn't go to San Antonio and forget it. Yes, eventually.
Just highlighting the discussions from our small group. It was very engaging. Thank you for even creating that space and time for us to reflect. What we discussed was mapping patterns of violence, and found that there is something about the children's bodies and children as targets, and connecting the children and the women together, and how this collective, dehumanizing them and making them as property. It's so familiar a pattern. Talked about Pharaoh, Herod, would once again go after the kids, the children. So what is it about the children who are perceived as a threat to their own continuation of power? We see that, and wondering if we can do something about our conversation, because next year is crucial. 2024 elections. Is there something that we can do, theologizing in a different way, at least analyzing our methods, content, so that we can bring about a change?
Thank you.
Can I pick up on that?
Yeah, this will be the last comment because we need to.
As you were speaking, I think what occurred to me is it's really interesting to think about the children, right? Because we think about them as innocents. But how much more difficult is it to deal with the people who aren't innocent in this? And how do we honor their humanity when we know they are complicit in whatever way?
Well, if you thought you had it all together,
Thanks,
yeah. I want to thank you very much for this session. I thought it really was amazing at many levels, and your participation made it that. I also want to invite you to send materials to us that were put into the report that you want to share with other people. For example, your presentation, Michelle, wouldn't people like to have that? And some of the, where's Tracy, some of the podcast links, things that you folks from Australia mentioned would be helpful to those of us outside of Australia who haven't been following this as carefully. Although I did give Michelle some clippings that I had, remember you used to clip newspapers? I actually clipped a couple of newspapers on the referendum materials, because it's really, the referendum itself, but also just referendum in general, because it is so important to get a perspective from other countries as you read this from your own. So send us any links that you want us to put into the report. You will get our report. You will also have access to the video, so if there are things that you want to revisit, I know I do, things that didn't quite take for me the first time, but I want to revisit, I'll have that to do it with. Tomorrow we'll see you at 12:30 at the caucus, which will be in the CC, that is the Convention Center Stars 1 room, and several of the people who are speaking are here with us. Acknowledge your presence and very delighted to have, yeah, I know, 1 and 2, and Grace couldn't make it, but at least we have you two. And I said earlier, and Elaine, before you got here, I said how important those papers are and how much I appreciated reading them. So I think it's going to be a great session.
And you're giving a response.
I'm giving a response,
I
yeah.
look forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I want to thank Michelle once again for really preparing something so suitable for this audience, really very suitable. You gave us enough detail, but enough nuance and also enough analysis that I think we can go away from this with what I would like to suggest, which is that we pick up some of those themes in our May meeting on Zoom, and that we add to it the ERA question to show another example of how sexism works with racism in terms of some of the same dynamics. So we'll try to do that if the person is available or health permits. And then other themes and topics that you would like us to deal with. Does anything jump at you right out for the moment for next year, other than the elections, which will sadly be over by then? But although we wanted to, I want to make a proposal that those who are here from outside the country would be, of course, given the vote, so you would be able to vote. The quorum of Americans gathered here are giving you the vote. So I want to thank Diane for tech support, that we'll have a video of this.